Energy Realities podcast with Tammy Nemeth. Hello, Tammy. How are you today?
Hi, Irina. I'm great. How are you?
So. I've been better, but I will be fine. We have David Blackmon. How are you today, David?
Well, I'm doing better than Taylor Swift is doing this morning. Got that going for me.
Poor girl. Or
You look better than Taylor Swift.
Except she's very famous for some reason. And Stu Turley. Stu, are you also better than Taylor Swift?
I look better than Taylor Swift too. So,
You do.
hey, thank you. It's going to be a great day. I don't know who dressed her boyfriend, but I think she's going to dump him after that horrible loss. She's going to write a song about it. She's going to dump him. And that poor man is just going to go live like a bum.
It happened.
So even though the guys are talking about music right now and sports, I assume, we're actually going to talk about Trump's drill baby drill desires that are not meeting the willingness of the oil industry in the United States, and not just the United States, which is why we call this episode Drill Baby Drill is a double-edged sword. David, why?
Oh, man, you startled me there.
Sorry.
So, drill, baby, drill, of course, is Trump's mantra for restoring the country to energy dominance through a big drilling boom, which isn't going to happen because the shale plays have all matured and all the big shale operators are in a development drilling mode, which is dramatically scaled back from the boom days 10 years ago. And, it just that they don't really have any incentive to embark on a big increase in active drilling rigs. These companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, Oxy, and independent producers like Diamondback Energy and others have been in this corporate sweet spot where they're maximizing profits. They're doing stock buyback programs. They're returning a lot more capital back to investors. They've been setting record profits. Exxon had record profits in 2023 and big profits in 2024 again. And so they got a decade ahead of them now in this development phase of these big shale plays where they can continue in this mode, growing by acquisitions and buyouts, without having to bear the cost and the societal cost and the PR cost of increasing all the truck traffic and getting into another drilling boom. So the other problem, of course, is prices aren't high enough to justify it. In fact, oil prices have actually dropped a little bit since Trump came into office, which is the other side of his goal, right? He wants lower prices but a big drilling boom. Well, you have to have the opposite to incentivize more drilling. You have to have higher oil prices, and there doesn't seem to be much prospect for that to happen here, at least this year. The market is well supplied. It may be a little oversupplied, and OPEC Plus is still itching to put more oil back onto the market, and they can't justify doing that because the market's already fully supplied. So I just think this drill baby drill thing is not likely to come about. And what we do need is a build baby build kind of period of time where we add a lot of new natural gas pipeline capacity and export capacity. And I suspect that's really where the big companies in this country are going to focus their capital.
Did Chris Wright say that, David? Are you like sneaking in a Chris Wright quote? You sneaky dog.
I think he got it from me.
Oh, okay, cool. Build baby build from Chris Wright. He had that in his.
Did he say that really?
Yes. So he is Chris
I started
Wright.
saying it in November, so maybe he got it from me.
Well, see, look at
Great
you.
minds and all that.
Bloomberg actually had to have watched my interview with Chris Wright because Bloomberg put out an article and says he even drinks frack fluid. And I'm like, yes, they watch my podcast. Yay.
Oh my gosh.
I think to me the biggest sort of a paradox with Trump's drill baby drill is that he wants to drill Russia into the ground by adding supply and tanking prices, but he doesn't seem to realize, or he does realize, I don't know, that low oil prices are not good for US drillers. In fact, they're much worse for US drillers in the shale patch than they are for Russian conventional well operators. But Tammy, do you think that Trump's pullout from the Paris Agreement and his general anti-net zero stance could somehow at some point motivate oil producers to produce more?
That's a good question, but I think it kind of goes back to the piece you wrote the other day, or maybe it was today, where you said it's always about the price. It really is about the price. And it's, what David said also, that, there's little interest when the prices are low. And so the motivation comes in when the prices are high, because otherwise, what's the point of drilling and everything if you're not going to make a reasonable return out of it? And as we know, the Middle East is an easier, they have a better return on investment. There's less inputs that they have to put in there in order to generate a fair amount of revenue. And so, on the one hand, he's saying to Saudi Arabia, please drill more, produce more so we can bring the price down. But to bring the price down is not in the vested interest of Saudi Arabia. No. Because they want to keep a moderately high price. It's like, how high can we have that price and have people still wanting to purchase it without putting it into recession? And, there was a time probably during, I would say, the golden age of American production, which was the 50s and 60s, when prices were relatively stable. It was the prices were set basically by the Seven Sisters. It wasn't on the world market, based on the concessions that were agreed upon with the Middle Eastern countries and the domestic suppliers in the United States. And then when it switched to the world price in the 80s, I would say 70s and 80s, then that all changes, and it becomes much more fluctuating based on how people feel, the confidence of the traders or whatever, or predictions of where they think things are going in the next, 2 weeks to 6 months or whatever. And so prices fluctuate based on things. Maybe it's an algorithm, who knows, right?
Oh, definitely. The algorithms do have a very, very big role to play.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so what variables are put into those algorithms that are helping generate whatever the price forecasts are or whatever. But I think the other issue in here is the refilling of the SPR, because it's down so far that this could have an effect on prices, but you want to fill it when prices are lower. But if you start filling it, then that's taking oil off the market, which then could increase prices. And so there's a dynamic there, and it's unclear exactly how this is going to work out. And I think it's great what Joanna pointed out there, that her nephew working in the Permian, they're drilling new wells. 4 new wells there.
Sure. Yeah.
The potential is there, but it's uncertain. You can send these signals, but what are companies going to do with those signals?
And to be clear, the Permian is the most active drilling basin on the face of the earth. I mean, there's still, I think last week there were 336 active rigs in the Permian out of something over 500 nationwide in the United States, according to Embarrass. So over half the active rigs in the country are in the Permian Basin. So I'm not saying companies aren't drilling. They're drilling substantial number of wells. But it's the development phase. You're not going out and discovering new resource right now. All the major shale formations are being exploited, and it's just a matter of drilling all the wells to satisfy your drilling obligations now among your lease agreements on all the acreage you hold. And companies like Oxy, Exxon, Chevron, and Diamondback are all drilling a good number of wells right now.
Yeah, but there's something we don't often talk about, but some observers and analysts talk about that. Shale drilling is a lot more intensive, as in the wells don't last for years and years and years and years.
Right.
They get depleted much more quickly, which necessitates more drilling just to maintain production.
Yeah, but also you're going to have a lot now because so many thousands of wells have now been drilled out there. You only get 10 to 15% of the producible product out of the first frac job in these long lateral shale wells. And so you're going to see a lot of refracs already happening in the Permian, the Eagle Ford Shale, and other basins. And so, I mean, it's going to extend the lifetime of these formations is going to be decades and decades. I mean, 100 years from now, they're probably going to be going back into some of these shale wells and doing another frac job with better technology.
And they'll be finding new ways to improve
Yeah.
efficiency and
Yeah.
recovery, because this is what the industry does.
Yeah.
Stu,
Right.
what's your take on drill, baby, drill, and whether it's a double-edged sword? Well, it's obviously a double-edged sword.
I loved
How sharp
everybody.
it is.
I loved everybody's comments so far. In fact, when you take a look at Saudi Arabia, they've done as best as they possibly can to keep OPEC and OPEC Plus in line, but they don't have a control over it. And the algorithms do play a gigantic role on this anymore. And so we need an estimated $4 trillion of investment in new wells just to meet normal decline curves if demand remain constant. So if you sit back and take a look, where are all those new rigs? The other piece of this discussion on drill baby drill is we need a mix with our refineries, and there is a gigantic, we can't use the light Permian crude just straight up. We got to mix it with heavy oil sands out of Canada or Venezuela or somewhere else to mix it to get it into the refinery. That all happens in Cushing as we pump it into the pipelines, and then they mix the crudes, all that kind of stuff. Now, that being said, will drill baby drill when you have light Permian crude? No. We're still going to be importing in a very big chunk. Saudi Arabia really needs it around that $80 mark when you consider how much that they're paying in their sovereign wealth fund. Several years ago, they had the flexibility to try to just take the United States shale down. They just dropped the price back then. They don't have that flexibility now because they're now funding billions of dollars worth of green hydrogen projects. They're now funding all these other kinds of things out of their sovereign wealth fund that Saudi Aramco is doing. So when you take a look at the moving pieces in the oil markets now, it's really changing up.
Yeah. So what's your take, Irina?
Oh, I already said it. I don't think it's going to work because he basically wants to do two mutually exclusive things. He wants American energy dominance, for which he needs more production, but this will push prices much lower, which is against the interest of the industry, plain and simple. But I was thinking, today I corresponded with someone who's in the energy field in Europe. And hey, he told me he expects the Paris Agreement to be a bad memory by this summer. Good. Because more countries will pull out of it and just forget about net zero because, energy affordability and security and reliability are all much more important. And more countries are waking up to this. Now, I'm not sure it will happen this quickly. But it may get some momentum from Trump, which is a good thing, I believe.
One of the things you notice, though, is that these societal trends tend to happen much more rapidly than any of us think they're going to, right?
That's true.
It's like it begins as a trickle and turns into a flood just the next day sometimes. And so it could, I think possibly it could happen by summer, but you wouldn't expect it to all happen then.
I don't think it would happen officially. I don't think countries will come out, okay, we made a mistake. That's not going to happen. But a lot of countries may indeed pull out of it, like Indonesia already signaled.
I think this brings up a bigger issue, and that is that getting out of the Paris Accord, getting out of the WHO, getting out of, you know, the other ones. All of a sudden they're having to redo their budgets. And then von der, the EU lady, just put out that she may want a different NATO. NATO's in trouble. And when you take a look at NATO being in trouble, the EU is in trouble. And then you have whether or not they're going to have that. This is a big rabbit hole.
They want to make a European armed force now.
Yeah. They've been talking
Good
about
luck
that for a while.
after you send all your weapons to the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Nice. Wasn't that beautiful?
Like you.
So the can of worm of getting out of the Paris Accords is really getting out of NATO, getting out of all of the NGOs that the USAID was funding, getting out of all these things. We're going to see a major realignment of funding around the world, not on American back. And I think I have Doge, a video of Elon's team looking at some of this stuff. This is absolutely what they're finding. I cannot believe that we got this. This is an undercover video. There's no sound, so be careful. Let me play that again. Sorry.
Whoop.
Here we go. I'm not sure what's going on here. There we go. There's Doge. That's what they're finding.
How they look when they look at the books of USAID.
Yeah. Oh my. Oh.
We gave 262 million to George Soros. Wait a minute.
And then George Soros turned around and funded Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and all these other kind of things.
Well,
and so when you see
all the left-wing prosecutors who don't
a
prosecute
lot of things in Eastern Europe. That's why the Hungarians kicked him out.
Yeah.
And all
exactly, that man needs to go away. And so
he has a son. The son's already, you know.
Yeah.
He's taken over the organization. Well, I mean, one of the interesting things is that both Mark Carney and the EU have said pointedly that Trump is a blip and they're just going to wait for sense to return to the United States, just like last time. They think somehow this will be a repeat of what happened between 2016 and 2020. I don't think they understand precisely what's happening. And now that they're targeting all of this wasteful spending, where, you know, money was flowing to all these different organizations in a rather circuitous way such that the money loses its character. I think if the EU thinks it's going to step in and pay for things like NATO and the WHO and the UN and everything, they don't have the money. They're already in debt trying to do their Green Deal. So I think they're going to have to make a choice between, can we maintain the investments that they're subsidizing with the Green Deal, or can they afford to pay for the UN and NATO and the WHO and all of these other organizations? So there's going to have to be a prioritization. And now France is giving money for an AI center, of course. The UK is giving money for an AI center. I think Trump is the smartest where he's getting the companies and other investors to pay for it rather than the state. And so when you've got that kind of scenario coming in, that's going to need a lot of reliable energy. Yes, it could be the oil. The oil prices are an issue, but I think we need to have a little chat about natural gas and what the plan is to enhance the production of natural gas. Japan, it was in the America last week and signed an agreement for LNG terminals out of Alaska. I mean, that's a pretty big thing going on there.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not 2017 again. I mean, I agree with you. I think a lot of people on the left are trying to self-soothe themselves by going around saying that. But I mean, this is different. It's an entirely different phenomenon this time, and with a lot of majority public support behind it that he didn't have in 2017.
And
yeah, that's true.
Tammy and David, and when people say that this is a passing fad, Doge was actually, the president does not have the authority to create something. It has to come from Congress if it's a whole new organization. The beautiful thing about Doge is it is a Obama organization
Yeah.
that has been rebranded, which the president has the authority to do. It had backlinks and hooks in it from the Obama mechanism. So this is not a new creation. Doge is a Obama brand that already had data hooks into everything, is why they're moving so fast.
Yeah.
So the deep state weapon that was created by Obama is now being used against them. It is not going to change again. I mean, it's not going to go back again.
Yeah. Well, and I think those comments by Ursula von der Leyen and other EU representatives and Mark Carney were made before Doge made all these discoveries about the spending and stuff. And so, you know, now that all that funding's been cut off, that they were funneling to all of these different activist organizations,
Independent
international
media.
dependent media. I mean, that was insane. How much money for like to Associated Press, and
Politico,
and,
And Reuters and Politico.
You know, they
Yeah.
lay people off. One of the most outspoken pro-EU, pro-Euro-Atlantic values, you know, media dailies are offering 1 year free subscription. And they're firing people, and it's glorious. I love it, and I'm really grateful once again for all this. But I want to go back to something you said, Tammy, about Mark Carney and the Ursulas of the European Union. What you said, that they really believe he's a blip and it's all going to change in 4 years. I think this proves that they're really, really incompetent. They are not living in the real world. And evil though they might be, as in, well, I'm sure that they believe they're doing good and getting rich while doing good. But they're also incredibly incompetent and stupid, because they, if what you say is true, it appears to be true based on these comments you cited, they have no idea why Trump got elected.
Yeah. Well, and plus it's a part of that confidence game, right? So if they keep saying over and over, even if, you know, they're articulating their wishful thinking, they're hoping that they can get companies not to buy in, right? So it's like, oh, no, it's going to be gone in 4 years. Stay the course. And this is about trying to reinforce the companies, the businesses that would normally support, who have been kind of, I would say, not normally, they've been pushed into supporting the Green Deal and all of the kind of climate stuff. They're saying, no, hold on, stay the course. He's not going to last. Instead of, kind of sending that messaging.
But they're already losing money. These companies, these investors are losing money on their green investments.
Yeah, I know.
With all the support in the world. How do you justify staying the course if you're actually losing money? Despite all the subsidies, despite all the other kinds of incentives, despite all the laws, especially enacted to push forward the energy transition. You can keep saying it, but it doesn't make it true.
Now that the
lemon
piggy bank has dried up, I think we're going to see a change. One of the things that I found most interesting as far as elections go around the world is how much USAID was investing in electronic voting machines.
Yeah.
That to me, if I was a non-US citizen in a different country, I'd want to know, why is USA doing regime change? USAID is doing regime change and voting machines and all this other kind of stuff. So I'd be thrilled. I think the world is going to be peacer, have a better peaceful outcome with this change.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, everything USAID was involved in terms of supposed foreign aid to children or whatever, they claimed it was about, was all done to advance U.S. foreign policy objectives and influence in those regions. Didn't have anything really to do with saving anybody's lives or preventing AIDS or anything like that. It's because the U.S. wanted hegemony in those countries and to prevent China and Russia from getting into them. That's what all of those programs are about. None of them are, oh, Americans are good-hearted people, we want to save the poor children in Africa. They're all about America wants influence and as part of their empire and access to the resources in these various regions, and doesn't want China and Russia getting to them. That's what that's all about, every one of those programs. Now, that doesn't mean some of those programs weren't producing some positive results for the countries the money's going into, but we need to be realistic about the motivations behind what USAID has been doing all these years. It's a front group for the CIA. That's what USAID has always been. And now it's going away. And about 90% of its budget is going to go away. And that's going to help Trump completely revamp the intelligence community in the United States and the State Department in the United States, which is simply an adjunct to the CIA itself. I mean, that's what all of this is about. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg in all of that. It has nothing to do with drill, baby, drill, though. Sorry.
Or maybe it's another kind of drilling into the iceberg to expose more of it.
Yeah. But back to drill, baby, drill. We're going to keep drilling. We're going to have a static rig count for the next 4 years. Prices are going to remain pretty stable unless there's an economic recession. And so these companies that have been in this sweet spot, this corporate sweet spot, with high profitability, low risk endeavors here in the United States, are going to be able to stay there for the next 4 years. That's really what's, I think, is going to happen. And it's good for the U.S. oil and gas industry.
Yeah. Well, especially the gas aspect, right? Because, even if the oil market becomes more saturated, there's people who would prefer a different supplier for their LNG, especially if they're still trying to be sort of emissions friendly or whatever. And I just want to point out that, like, with respect to the Japanese agreement or deal or whatever it is with the United States last week, they came to Canada 18 to 24 months ago asking for the same thing. And we told them there was no business case. So, it's Canada shoots itself in the foot, and there's potential to there's been, I think, two other LNG terminals approved on the BC West Coast. But now there's issues with a second pipeline to supply those new terminals. And the British Columbia, the province of British Columbia, has put in all of these regulations about how they can liquefy that natural gas. They have to use electricity. They can't use natural gas power. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so whether or not these LNG terminals actually become operational is kind of a mixed question at this point.
Well, you're going to be non-competitive price-wise with the United States LNG. If you force them to use renewables and electricity to produce the LNG, you're going to be non-competitive.
I know.
It's just,
I know.
This is very simple. None of this is complicated. It really is. It's crazy.
And the renewables have a worse impact on the environment. I don't get that, but you also bring up a very valid, another kind of hidden point, and that is if President Trump does not actively get rid of the Jones Act and rebuild our shipping and our thing right now, when you take a look at the Japan contract and that they're looking at signing, it's to buy US LNG so that he can offset the trade imbalance so that he doesn't get tariffs. So you can pay a little bit more for the LNG, but you can't pay way beyond because the Russian natural gas is cheaper from a 40-mile pipeline to Japan, and poof, you're there.
I really like that pipeline, don't you?
Pipelines are so much better than LNG.
Yeah, I agree.
But when you're trying to offset a trade imbalance, LNG is Trump's ace in the hole for trying to export things, because Canada has always had tariffs on our agriculture and our cars. In one of my first cars was a Ford F-150 pickup made in Canada. I mean, and so when you sit back and take a look at tariffs that are around the world, how many Fords do you see in Germany? You don't, because they're tariffed. So the rest of the world tariffs the United States. And now that it's flipping back around, there's a big media push to put a bad name on tariffs when everybody else in the world tariffs.
Stu, I'm sorry, I need to correct you on that issue about cars in Canada. We've had an arrangement with the United States that was from the 1960s called the Auto Pact, and it was incorporated into the various free trade agreements we've had with the United States.
Right.
And that was to rationalize and integrate the trade of vehicles in the North American market between Canada and the United States to prevent those kinds of tariffs. So, sorry. I agree that. But the
But
issue actually,
Europe does have heavy tariffs on U.S.
Europe
cars.
definitely does,
Yeah.
and Ford has set up manufacturing plants in Europe, but those cars still cost a little bit more than other European brands.
My dad had a Ford produced in Germany, and a Ford Escort back in the 90s.
Yeah,
They were really popular, Europe-produced Fords.
I love Tom.
Good point.
Stu,
good
please,
point, Tom.
please quit calling them renewables. They're not renewable. And I couldn't agree more, Tom. They are unreliable. And so I think that now that there is a culture change that Tammy and Irina brought up, I think that calling them what they are is going to start happening more. And thank you, Tom, for that. Patrick brings up another fantastic point.
Yeah,
Africa.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great opportunity to develop African natural resources, but there's a huge problem, Patrick, because up until now, the former colonists of African countries have not been treating these countries well. So these countries are now kicking them out. And you have to win their trust. We're not talking about a completely unified continent. Africa is huge. Lots of countries, different governments, many of them corrupted, just like everywhere else in the world, but they're poorer. So in African countries, I think it's more easy to be corrupt if you're a government official. I speak as a Bulgarian. We're the most corrupted country in the EU, precisely because we're the poorest member. I mean, poverty goes with, hand in hand with easier corruption. So this will be a challenge. What Patrick describes is an ideal case. Yeah, let's all develop, Africa's resources and have the African nations benefit from the development of these resources.
Yeah.
And Patrick's funny. China has it by the he doesn't want to use the Doge.
Well, it doesn't really. That's the problem. I mean, you can hate China all you want. They're authoritarian. They have a horrible record in animal cruelty. I really take issue with this. But they're building roads in Africa. They're building infrastructure, and the Africans are happy with it. I mean, Jusper has talked about it. We like the Chinese. They build things in our countries. They don't just, come mine the cobalt and take it out. Right. Because the Chinese have learned from the French and the Brits and the Dutch and the Belgians.
And the Belgians and the Portuguese.
They have learned from other nations' mistakes. Why can't these same countries learn from their own mistakes is what really, truly makes me wonder.
Yeah.
Well, and Turkey has recently increased their activities in Africa as well, basically behaving like China, building roads and various other infrastructure. And I can understand why the Africans would want to do that, so that they're not all sort of putting all their eggs in one basket with respect to Chinese investment, but to diversify the infrastructure investment with Turkish companies.
Everyone learns except from Europe.
And the World Bank and the IMF and everybody, because they always put these ridiculous strings attached. Like sometimes the countries just cannot meet. And now the new strings have to do with green. So, yeah, we'll
All
help
they
you build
need
your
is
infrastructure.
austerity. Yeah, we
Right,
need
right.
structural reforms and austerity. That's the
Yeah,
only thing the World Bank and the IMF knows. Yeah,
yeah,
which is how they keep these nations poor,
Yeah.
but keep on extracting their resources. Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well, shall we
Tom's
go?
right. I mean, he says if the US did this kind of thing, that would be labeled imperialist. If you talk to the Chinese people and say, what you're doing is something of an imperialist project, they get really upset. And because they don't see it as being a sort of extension of Chinese power, even though one could argue it is. So, I mean,
Well,
that's a debate for another
this
day.
also
There are
brings up
different
the
of power. Sorry, Steve.
this brings up the Panama Canal.
Yes.
China has dropped into controls all over that. Last Saturday, I was talking to Michael Yon and was invited down to Panama to go interview and visit with some folks down there. And I couldn't to NAPE in Houston. And you take a look at what China has done, and they have taken control over Panama. Now that they're building a bridge over the whole area, they're investing in roads to further infiltrate the United States and keep it going, keep the illegal invasion going. But it's going to be stopped now. Watch Panama, because President Trump is not kidding. He is, by treaty, allowed to go in and seize control of that. And I think he will.
But look what China did in order to gain the influence in Panama. They built enormous new ports, brand new ports at both ends of the canal that and have allowed Panama free access to those ports. And so that's how they gain the influence. And it's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. The United States should have been doing that, right?
Yeah.
But Stu is absolutely right, too. Under our treaty, in which control of that canal was conveyed to Panama, if Panama abrogates its responsibilities under that treaty, the United States has an absolute right to just go in there and retake control of that canal. And that's what Trump is going to do unless the Panamanian government starts behaving, in compliance with the treaty. I mean, it just is what it is.
President Trump was using some of Michael Yon's pictures of China, and China is everywhere in there, and they have taken total control of it. But the point being is that Panama will no longer be Panama if we don't do anything as United States, because it will be overtaken by someone else.
Absolutely.
Can
And
you bring
that
up
just from a
that
national security perspective cannot happen.
about that these roads that I was talking about will help get product to market, product that is extracted by slavery in horrid safety conditions. That's happening in the Congo. It's not happening everywhere. And besides, they're not building these roads exclusively to service their mines. I mean, I remember a couple of Top Gear episodes a very long time ago when they stepped on the Chinese-made road somewhere in Africa. Was it Uganda, Eastern Africa, Central Eastern Africa? Remember, Tammy?
Yeah.
And they were saying how well this road was built. I mean, once the road is built, everyone can use it. That's the point. I'm not saying the Chinese are the good guys. I'm not even thinking in categories like good guys, bad guys. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys. No, they're doing something that the locals find useful. Why are Nigerians so hostile to big oil? Because big oil did not do this. It could have.
Yeah, none of it. Yeah.
It could have prevented a lot of oil theft that is now, ruining the Niger Delta.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They only invested in what was strictly necessary for their own operations. And that was a mistake that the Chinese learned from.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lesson to be learned from the West. It's right there. It's not hard.
NJ Inuk is the African Energy Chamber CEO, and he has the right attitude. There is so much corruption in Africa that if you could get oil and gas development, get natural gas everywhere, get oil and gas, have manufacturing jobs in Africa, and then set that up as a trading partner and then buy finished goods from Africa, you'd make a lot more money as the United States if you did that to help end corruption.
Yeah.
NJ Inuk is a fantastic leader in Africa for the African Energy Chamber.
This is what Indonesia do a few years ago with its nickel production. It just passed a law that said miners need to build refineries, nickel refineries in Indonesia instead of taking the raw material out of the country cheaply and processing it elsewhere.
Alberta did the same thing in the 1970s because they were moving most of the oil to Eastern Canada for refining. And they said, no, we want a chemical processor and refineries in the province using our oil rather than sending it out.
Yeah.
So this isn't anything new, right? I mean,
if you want to, and it's not right.
You want jobs locally because this is your resource. Why shouldn't you? And part of it is, you know, with respect to where the demand is, who's purchasing it, and so on. But yeah, why wouldn't you? Why?
Right.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing unusual.
It's really simple, but it's probably not easy. Okay, let's go to the headlines.
I think these are mine. And the Brian Lilley is a columnist in the Toronto Sun. He had a great article about the Japan LNG deal and how Trudeau denied the deal in 2023. So excellent article, makes the points I talked about in the thing about how we said there's no business case and Japan went away all sad because we weren't there to help our allies. And that's been the point of the Trudeau regime since he came into power, is that when our allies come calling, asking for help, we say, no, we can't do it. We can't afford our NATO commitments, apparently, because we're spending so much on climate initiatives. And because of the climate initiatives, we can't help our allies with what they need, which is oil and gas, which is what we have. So, you know, that's that article. And then the other one is that Ford is projecting another, I think it's like a $5 billion loss on EVs for 2025. I mean, the amount of money they lose per EV, whether it's the Ford Lightning or any of their other smaller vehicles, it's outrageous. They lose tens of thousands on every vehicle. So how is that a good business model? How much is it?
$56,000 per unit sold.
Per unit. Like, that is not sustainable. So, yeah, as you know, we've had these.
But it is renewable. It is renewable.
It's in what way? I mean, they can recycle the vehicle or something.
They should
They can't even recycle the battery.
They should at least give them away to, I don't know, poor households who won't be able to afford the charging.
To charge it. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, those are my two stories.
And your Substack?
Oh, yeah. So my Substack is thenemethReport.substack.com. I'll have a new posting later today.
Awesome. Oh, this is me. So I've written a lot here over the past few weeks about litigation hitting the oil and gas industry. There's a big Lawfare effort that's managed by a single law firm out of San Francisco that has recruited a bunch of cities and counties and states to sue the oil industry, alleging negative impacts from climate change, cleverly structured, though, as damages under state laws governing consumer protection and things unrelated to the energy industry. These lawsuits are getting rejected point by point now by judges at all levels in both the state and federal judiciary. The latest bad decision for this lawfare effort was in New Jersey, where the Rockefeller Foundation had invested almost $1 billion trying to convince the state of New Jersey, and by lobbying and advertising and these kinds of heavy-handed tactics to join this lawfare effort. Well, the Attorney General finally joined it a couple of years ago, and they just got poured out of a state district court because their lawsuit makes no sense and has no real basis. So they're continuing to lose, but they'll no doubt continue to try to recruit new states and cities to engage. And then,
but David,
yes.
With that New Jersey ruling, didn't the judge say it was with prejudice and therefore it
Yes.
couldn't be appealed?
That's right. No appeal.
Yeah.
That
No
one was
appeal.
dismissed with prejudice. The city of Baltimore's case was also dismissed with prejudice. I'm not sure about the city of New York's case, whether it was with or without prejudice. But, these judges are getting tired of having their dockets crowded up with these cases. And, eventually the Supreme Court is going to have to intervene and issue a nationwide decision to shut this down. In Louisiana, the state of Louisiana, and just to be clear, I like Governor Landry. He's a good guy. He was a good attorney general. He's a fine governor, but he's on the wrong side of this issue. He's chosen to involve the state and himself personally as governor in these lawsuits brought by a big law firm in Baton Rouge, the Scaramouche law firm, that has recruited a bunch of the parishes in South Louisiana to try to get a bunch of billions of dollars out of big oil companies for their land loss issues. Okay. And people who understand what's happened in Louisiana know that there's two major causes of land loss south of the Mississippi River. First of all, you've dammed up and diked up and levied up the river to control flooding and silting, which built that part of Louisiana in the first place over millions of years. And so you no longer have this flooding and silting process to rebuild, land that is subsiding. And then the second thing is, beginning in World War II, oil companies were indeed allowed to build a bunch of canals crisscrossing that whole region to produce oil and gas that was of a specific quality, oil that was of specific quality to be ideal for making jet fuels and airplane fuels. Aviation gas is what they called it. And so this was a government effort, and the industry was recruited to drill these wells and build these canals. And then every well and canal that's been drilled or put in South Louisiana since then has had to have a permit from the state of Louisiana to mount that project, right? And so now the state wants to turn around and sue these oil companies for damages that was not only permitted but encouraged by the state of Louisiana and the federal government in the first place. These lawsuits are wrong-headed. They're a bad use of people's money and time. And the governor of Louisiana, Mr. Landry, should not be allowing his government to be behind them. And the basic thing I wrote about there was he and Trump were going to be in that luxury box last night at the Super Bowl. And I was hoping the president might bring it up to the governor, that maybe this is a counterproductive use of his office. Anyway, so those are my two.
He was bored enough, David, during the game. He might have.
Yeah,
he was busy tweeting.
Yes, and putting out a tweet to halt the making of pennies from now on in the middle of the third quarter. That was just awesome.
David, I put this in here because you had a great one. Chris Wright comes out swinging on your.
Well, that was today. I mean, all I did was actually just cut and paste the press release that the secretary put out towards the end of last week announcing his agenda. It's fantastic. Everyone should read it. And my Substack is Energy Transition Absurdities, and it's a target-rich environment that I write about every day.
Are these mine?
Yes.
Okay. They're just one-liners, basically. Clean energy costs to continue to fall this year, report says. Yeah, that's falling so much. That's why Europe is building all these wind and solar installations, and it can't connect them to the grid. But never mind. The important bit is that costs are continuing to fall on a what basis, you ask? Have a guess.
Irina,
They're falling so much that your bill is increasing.
Yeah, but the levelized cost of energy, Tammy, is falling for wind and solar. It's got nothing to do with cheap Chinese imports. It's got nothing to do with cheap Chinese energy from coal.
Yeah.
They're falling, and that's great because I'm sure they will be putting it down, explaining it with, economies of scale or whatever. The more we manufacture, the cheaper they become. In China, yes.
In China.
But now the European Union wants to, mandate 40% or something of all this equipment getting produced, manufactured in the European Union.
Sure.
Let's see what those reporters will have to say about costs then, even on a levelized cost basis. So
can I comment on that?
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
That's a Reuters story.
Yeah.
One of the reasons Reuters got $30-odd million from USAID was specifically to write renewable energy propaganda like this. Okay. That's what they're being paid to do. They take millions of dollars every year, not just from the US government, but from billionaire-run foundations like the Rockefeller and Park Foundation, specifically to hire reporters to write this kind of propaganda.
Yes, and they also present reports from outlets such as Ember as genuine news.
Right.
It is presenting propaganda as news, and it's not just Reuters.
Yeah.
No, it's AP. It's all
everyone.
Yeah, AFP, all of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're also part of covering climate now.
Yeah, that's it. And then we have the other joke. German coal generation jumps to one-year high as wind plunges. I mean, Germany hasn't been able to get any meaningful amounts of wind since October or November, was it? For months.
For months, yeah.
For Germany. So now they're having to crank up the coal power plants. And it just doesn't get much funnier than this.
Well, and plus Norway and Denmark don't want to supply it through the interconnectors anymore because it keeps driving up the price for their domestic consumers.
Well, yes, because Denmark is dependent on wind as well. And if Germany doesn't have wind, chances are that Denmark probably doesn't have much wind either.
That's a great point, Patrick. It does look like Trump's signature. That's hilarious.
It's a Sharpie. They did it with a Sharpie.
Yeah.
Yes, Tom, that's correct.
Yeah. So
I want to bring this back up just for a second, Irina. Stu, please stop calling them renewables. They're not renewable. We can't call them clean energy either because they're not clean. So we gotta figure out our own new name.
Free energy.
That's right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know about wind turbines, but solar panels, they don't involve combustion, except at the power plant that supplies the grid electricity, that supplies the electricity that the inverter needs, unless you have batteries. It's complicated.
Right. It's complicated.
Okay. And Irina, your Substack?
Is Irina's Lab on Energy.
It's a good Substack.
Yeah, I loved the Adorbs one. That was great.
It really was Adorbs. I really hate these contractions of normal words.
I know. It's just Adorbs.
And it's so pathetic that it's Adorbs. Yeah. Thanks.
My favorite is totes, a contraction for totally. Totes.
Oh.
My daughter says
really?
That. Yeah.
Why do they put an S at the end of this? Anyway.
Do what?
Adorbs.
They put an S at the end of it. Yeah.
Oh.
Totes, adorbs.
Dorks. Just kidding. Okay. Yeah, these we've already covered a little bit on, and that is David brought this up earlier, and that is the liberal NGOs in crisis, the fallout of Trump's USAID freeze. We are just now getting into finding out how bad our government is and how bad people are getting upset about this. I think this next video is very important from the standpoint of which ones are the citizens and which ones are the politicians. So let's take a look at this one. Which ones are citizens and which ones are politicians? Okay.
Oh,
Which one's a politician? Which one's a citizen? Watch this. I think the citizens in the United States are getting a little bit irritated at their politicians.
We're becoming the cats.
We're becoming the cats. So watch this one. If you're a politician, start looking at this video and going, I got a bunch of people in the United States that are kind of irritated. Look at this one. Oh, yeah, that's a politician talking back, trying to talk back. Watch this one. Look at him. Now look at the cat up there.
but this is how politicians should respond to their citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had it reversed during the Biden years.
Assuming that what we see here is citizens demanding accountability from their elected representatives.
Exactly.
I can't believe that Democrats are deciding this is the hill to die on. Corruption and waste.
It's the very
Like,
worst issue they could choose. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we're mad that you're uncovering that there's corruption and waste. What?
They're threatening to shut down the government to stop Doge from being able to cut government spending. Think about that for a second. It's the most hilarious thing.
And the funny thing is that we don't realize that President Trump was brilliant when he took an Obama thing that we already talked about. He took an Obamacare digital thing that had illegal hooks into all agencies, and they're using that mechanism in order to be Doge. That is brilliant. So they just had the deep stated themselves. Oops. So now my next question is around the world, and that is Trump is now right sizing. If we take a look at when the United States actually was at its peak in wealth generation, we had no taxes and we tariffed things coming in. I think this is going to be a thing to watch over the next few years as President Trump tries to right size the trade balances and things. So I think this is going to be pretty entertaining as we go forward.
Oh yeah, we're in for a fun 4 years. Thank you.
The news cycle, I don't know about you guys, but I can't keep up with the news cycle right now. I mean, I am absolutely wiped out.
That's great.
Yeah.
So if we sit here and we take a look at the last piece of this puzzle, we had the citizens rising up against the politicians, and we sit back and kind of go, are we going to become the bullies if we're the citizens and we're cats? This one is also, are cats bullies?
They are.
Look at that.
Oh.
That is what I am. I'm turning the sound down so it doesn't get us turned off on our YouTube channels.
Smart dogs. Very smart dogs.
Yeah.
Because you're allowed 10 seconds and then they don't, then they get all grumped out at you. But I love that dragging the cat like that. You got to love that.
Oh my gosh.
Look at those cats ganging up, those citizens ganging up on that politician. Oh, they're going in for the juggler. Now watch this one. Look at the hand. Yeah, that. Watch that. And he's still he doesn't miss a beat, and he's still dressing down that cat. Watch this. Now that anyway, we're gonna have an absolutely fantastic week. We had a lot of great comments from everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick, especially for the comments about Africa and China. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
All right. We'll see everybody next week.
Have a wonderful week.
Have a great week.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.